Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Robbins, and welcome to Life, Death, and the Space Between podcast. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and medium, and here we explore life, death, consciousness, and what it all means. Today, I have Kiersten Parsons-Hathcock on the show. Mouthful. Kiersten is an award-winning self-taught carpenter, furniture designer, and founder of Mom Mod Furniture, a kids' furniture company featured on ABC's Shark Tank. She's also a TEDx speaker and an intuitive medium who works for the National Institute for Law and Justice, helping detectives and families uncover truth in missing persons and homicide cases. In her previous work, Kiersten was the staff writer for Northern Arizona University and a TV marketing executive for A&E TV Network and the History Channel. An Ohio native, she now resides in Phoenix, Arizona with her husband, Scott, daughters, Natalie and Grace, and pup, Scout. Her new book, Little Voices, is coming out in September. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited. We talked a while ago and you sent over the what is this considered? A manuscript?
Manuscript, yeah.
Of the book. So it is not even out yet. And I got a sneak peek. I told Kiersten before, in all honestness, I did not finish this one, but not because it wasn't good, because I started it too late. So I started it last night, and just to give you a sense of how good it was, I read almost half of it. So it was really, really well written and really a fascinating story that kept me intrigued to the point where I couldn't put it down despite how tired I was from being up quite late the night before. Thank you so much for everybody who has supported the podcast. So there's so many ways you can support the podcast and the work that I'm doing. One, you can spread the word about the podcast. So share the podcast with someone you know, repost my anything on social media. If you are a therapist listening to the podcast and you have a client who you think would benefit, share it with them. This podcast has grown completely organically. I've never done advertising. I've never done anything to boost the podcast. It is all because of you all sharing the podcast. And we are coming up on 1 million downloads, which is amazing. Other ways that you can support the podcast is through Patreon. So if you would like to become a patron, you can go to Patreon, put in Dr. Amy Robbins. You can find different tiers to support the podcast at the $5, $10, or $20 level, or any other denomination. And my $20 supporters do get once quarterly Zoom calls with me. They've been fabulous. For a while, I was doing them for all the supporters, but now I am closing that down to just the $20 a month supporters. I really want to honor those who are really committed to supporting the podcast. So thank you so much. And I just want to point out what a difference this makes for me. The podcast is just supported by me. I don't have advertisers yet, although I would love some. I don't have sponsors, although that would be great. So right now, the podcast is supported by you all. And I'm so grateful. If you benefit from the podcast, if your life has shifted or changed as a result of the podcast, please help me continue to help you have on these great guests. Also follow me on Instagram, Dr. Amy Robbins. I love hearing from my listeners, trying to do my best to be quick to respond. And lastly, rate, review, and subscribe. That is super important. Podcasts show up in people's algorithms is by other people subscribing and rating and reviews being higher. I also love reading the reviews. So you can rate the podcast, but you can also review the podcast. Thank you all for all of your support, for all of your love, for all of your helping to collectively raise the consciousness of this planet. I am so incredibly grateful. Tell us your story, because, you know, I start your bio by saying you're a carpenter and furniture designer. And
I know.
Incredible furniture company. And yet you're also an intuitive. So how did you notice these gifts, particularly because it's mostly children who come to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one that I get a lot. And, you know, as you were reading the bio, I was laughing because I thought, wow, I do wear a lot of hats nowadays. I never, ever would have imagined that this was where I would go, you know, in my life. But when I was 36 years old, let me back up. I'm very scientific. I'm from Ohio originally. My parents are teachers. I didn't grow up wondering about spirituality. I didn't grow up wanting to be a medium. None of that was in my view at all. So I grew up, I had a wonderful childhood. My parents are amazing. I, got to the age of 36. I was married with 2 kids, and I suddenly started seeing things and hearing things. And, I'm in the garage working on furniture, and nails are moving across the workbench. So it literally kind of hit me over the head to the point where I thought, I have really been breathing too much polyurethane. Like, there's no other way around it. This is psychosis. This is something with, these chemicals. And lo and behold, it was not. Yes. So I really just thought I was going crazy. And like I said, none of this was in my worldview. It wasn't like I had a bunch of psychic medium friends. It wasn't anything that I thought would come into my life. But, it did. And I'm really grateful for it. I ended up, sensing all of this stuff happening around me. And again, questioning if I was crazy. But ultimately, it led to me reaching out to law enforcement, because most of who was coming to me were children who had been murdered. And most of them had experienced some level of sexual abuse in their lifetime. So naturally, I have 2 years of channeling all of that and creating partnerships with cops around the country. And then I'm constantly wondering, well, why me? 36, I'm a mom. Okay, I get that. But why me? Like, I'm happy to do it. Why me?
So there was no precipitant to this. There was no, you had a near-death experience. You had anything. You didn't even experience a death. It was just suddenly you noticed that these little voices were coming to you.
Yeah, that was it. And that's why, I think it's an unusual story, and it's one that I wanted to tell for multiple reasons. But that is one of the reasons that I wanted to share this, because, I didn't have a near-death experience. I didn't have anything traumatic happen that I knew of, when this stuff started happening. And it's been 12 years now. I'm 48. I'll be 49 in September, around the time my book comes out, which is pretty cool. And I've definitely gotten used to it. I've, figured out how to set boundaries. I've figured out how to work with spirit better. And that aspect has been a gift, because it's translated into so many aspects of my life, my business life, my family life. Just being able to even talk about trusting your own intuition as a roadmap for life has been an amazing thing. And I've seen friends and family benefit from that too.
So talk to me a little bit, because the way you start the book is you're literally digging with a shovel.
Yes.
Tell me what it's like to hear from these young children who have been murdered in. And this is not going to be graphic or... Yeah,
I promise. No graphic detail.
Episode, so no need to turn it off. But what has that been like? And what do you find out? And how do you get it confirmed? And all of those pieces to know that the information you're getting is legitimate? Because it's one thing to get to be a medium and to have someone come to you and experience sharing your gifts and what you hear and see with them. But there were times where you actually sought out parents who had lost their children.
Yeah.
And that had to be a pretty nerve-wracking.
It was terrifying. It was terrifying. And, the last thing I wanted to do was cause more harm. I'm a parent myself. I put myself in that position. How would I feel if someone came to me? But overwhelmingly, as I started to continue to get validation and continue to trust, I knew I had to. There was no way I couldn't. And mainly what has happened, I've been able to get used to it to some degree, which sounds horrible, but it probably is similar to being a homicide detective. There is a numbness that has to sort of take over, because the first 4 or 5 cases I worked on, I was sobbing constantly. I couldn't pull myself together. I thought, why? I am not going to do this. There were many times I thought, I can't do this. But, I honestly didn't understand that they were coming to help me as much as I was helping them. And I didn't understand that I was in their club. I just hadn't been murdered. So, that was a gift, in that, yes, they came to me and they trust me with passing information to law enforcement, which also was terrifying. Can you imagine reaching out?
What did you do? Call the police department and say, hey, I've got someone's murdered child talking to me, but they're not here. I mean, how do you even make that call? I
didn't do that. I knew enough to not do that. It was interesting because, the universe presents things, right? As you know, being a medium and intuitive. And so they also present people to you. And so there would always be a connection somehow. And one of the main connections I have with the National Institute for Law and Justice, his name is Mark Pucci. He is a retired NYPD homicide detective. He's now the founder of this organization. I'm a co-chair. We've been working together on cases for about 10 years now. And I was put together with him because I volunteered to work on a missing persons case in New York City, because someone knew that person that was in my world. And then he volunteered his time to work on that. So that's how we got connected. So it wasn't as if I was running around sending faxes or calling up police departments. I knew enough not to do that.
So can you just take us through your process of how this works? I mean, does law enforcement seek you out, or do you seek out law enforcement based on the children that have come to you? Both? What does it look like?
It is mostly me in the beginning, especially reaching out to them. But I have my core people now. And especially through this new nonprofit that we just started, we have networks of detectives all over the world. So at this point, I'm really lucky, because when kids do come in and they have messages to share, I can say, Mark, who trusts me and believes in me, this is what I'm picking up. And then we can go from there. But for the most part, some of the kids will come in and they'll say, please just write this down and keep it. And my parents will be coming to you, which never made any sense to me, of course, in the beginning, because I was on Shark Tank. Yeah, but it was for my furniture company. So it wasn't like I thought, how are they going to find me? This isn't something I'm going to be public about, until I felt guided to write the book. So I think, there's a bigger picture here that has comforted me a bit, because a lot of what I've written about in Little Voices it's tough, from the standpoint of I'm putting a lot out there personally about my life. And ultimately the children came in basically saying to me, Kiersten, you were one of us. You just don't remember it. So once I gained enough confidence in my visions, I was able to then see me as a small child, and my uncle abusing me and my uncle raping me when I was 5. So, that it was instrumental, because if I started seeing that kind of information prior to channeling other children and getting validation from cops, I wouldn't have believed it at all. I would have no idea that I was that person.
For some of these missing persons reports that are really prominent, like let's take Madeline McCann, right?
Right.
These names that people know, or the Natalie Holloways of the world.
Right.
And those parents would come to you. Have you ever not been accurate, or
I'm
they
sure
haven't come through, or how would that work?
Yes. Especially in the beginning, when I was first trying to decipher what all this was, because I see, I'll get visions of, what's happening. But if I try to, I've learned along the way, if I try to, deduce what this actually is, sometimes I'm not right about that. It's like putting a puzzle together, right? Like you're trying to figure out, okay, well, this is a clue and this is a clue. I've been lucky in that the cases that I have worked on, I have been able to point folks and detectives to, sites where remains are and things like that. that's not something that, I'm super proud of. I don't want to be able to do that, but I also know that it's something that I need to do in this lifetime.
Mm-hmm. And it must bring such like closure to parents who don't.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're a mom, I'm a mom.
Right.
Like,
right. Yeah.
to not have knowledge of what happened to your child has got to be the worst thing in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think about that every single time, that I do talk to a parent or I'm working on a case. It's a blessing and a curse. And I do not know everything by any means. I love listening to your podcast. I was just in the middle of listening to your last one and right before we got on, and I thought I have to keep going. As soon as we get off, I'm going to, finish this one. I'm learning along the way. Mm-hmm. And, the biggest lesson I've learned is I have to trust that quiet sort of inner knowing. There were times when I was scared to death to reach out. And so I would put the notes away. And then eventually I would get this, like I would be doing something different, washing the dishes or helping my children, or I'd be in the garage, and I would get this overwhelming calm, like now's the time. And I would know. So if I recognize that I'm not in a state of fear about it, then I know that it's the right thing to do and the right thing to share. But it's scary. That's for sure.
Well, and what's amazing, like even as I'm talking and listening to you, is that it's almost like, I've interviewed so many people in the spiritual space, and it's like you've developed like a niche. A little bit of as morbid as this is, it might be like the most morbid part of this, right? Children who have been murdered.
It's true.
But what a gift to be able to bring to people.
Yeah, I feel that way. And it is interesting because, I can sometimes I'll channel someone's grandfather, if spirit wants to get through, they'll get through, as long as I've set up that it is for my highest good, because otherwise I'm inundated constantly. So I had to create all these boundaries, but mainly, it is children who have been murdered, children who have been aborted, who have been miscarried, and understanding the soul path journey and what that is and what that means to the family as well has been actually very comforting to me, coming from the viewpoint of not really having a huge, strong, foundation. I wasn't like I was in the church pew every week when I was growing up. I believed in God. I believed in a higher power, but I didn't have a lot of information on why we're here, and this thing called Earth School and all that jazz.
How did you start to uncover your own trauma and abuse through their stories?
So and again, this wasn't anything that I recognized, and I didn't ask for it. I was around the age, I was 39, I was turning 40, and apparently that's pretty common, and you could probably speak to this in psychology, for repressed memories to come out around that time period. I did not know anything about that. I can look back now. Let me ask
this. What were the age of your children? Were they the age that you were?
They were, that's a good question. They were a little bit older than that, actually. Okay. A little bit older, yeah.
But I do. Sometimes there's that piece that plays into it where whatever we experience as a child at that age, when our children become that age, it can bring up a lot of those old repressed. I've not heard about it being around. I've never actually heard anything about 40 being. Doesn't mean it's not true. I just had heard it. But I do know that oftentimes that connection between your child being an age that you were can bring up a lot of unresolved stuff as well.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I think I have heard that before. It was an interesting time period because I think ultimately I was spending a lot of time alone in the garage building furniture. And it was before I ended up with a manufacturer. And so I think I never looked at that time as meditative or even what that meant to channel. But that's how it started, initially. So I had been channeling children for about 2.5 years prior to having my own visions of myself. Now that hit me out of the blue. I had no clue. I remember just sitting on the edge of the bed one day and having a flash, of a belt buckle and then seeing my face. I'm used to seeing other kids' faces. and I'm seeing my face. And I just kind of sat there and thought, what is going on? Why am I seeing this? And I remember kind of starting to sweat, and, it was shocking, and it was hard, and I didn't want to think about it, but progressively the subconscious just kept letting more out. And the kids kept saying, this is why we're coming to you, because I endured something similar to them. And so that was the piece that was really impactful, and it actually made me want to do more, honestly. I felt very, very much like, okay, I'm in this club with these kids. Here we go.
What did you do with this information once it was being shown to you? Because I think that, this is a really interesting way of experiencing what you experience, right? And there's a lot of, I don't know if you'd call it controversy, but certainly discussion in the field of psychology about repressed memories.
Absolutely.
And how we, as therapists, how we approach that, how we bring them up, because you don't want to suggest that this happened to anybody. Yeah. But also you, it sounds like you saw it almost as if you were watching a movie.
Yeah.
That was your life. So what did you do with that once you saw it? And how would someone know or be able to differentiate? Because I would hate for people to suddenly go to this place of, oh, wait, I had this flash of something and maybe I was abused, or, this happened to me, because I think you have to be careful with
you do.
This. It's very, very.
Absolutely. You have to be very careful with it. And, for me, I would say, because it happened out of the blue, it wasn't like I was in a therapist's office and there, we weren't saying, okay, let's think back to childhood. Could there be anything? There was no coaxing involved. And truth be told, I had enough confidence in myself and in my intuition to know that this was real. I immediately, of course, then, because by this time I did have friends who were mediums that I trusted very much. And I did reach out to them and I said, I'm having these visions. One of the particular mediums actually channeled one of the room where I was raped down to a T. Now, I have trouble with memory, with that type of detail in memory from that time period in my life, but my sister doesn't. So I called her up and I said, Nicole this is everything that she's seeing. Whose bedroom is this? And my sister said, her jaw dropped, because she knew exactly whose bedroom that was. Mm-hmm. And she remembers that type of detail. So it was really interesting to get that type of evidential stuff. And then I started to look back at my life and I started to go backwards. And when I was 19, I had to have vaginal surgery, which I thought was a congenital defect, which actually could have been the hymen and scar tissue from when, I was very young. So I couldn't use tampons. I was having a lot of issues, and it was really, not something I wanted to talk about at 19, but inevitably I ended up having to have surgery. So I can actually point to now physical effects. I can point to, everything that I endured as a child. I had terrible time potty training, according to my mom. I was very, very shy. I was a very happy, smiley kid. And I was a very open kid. And I'm sure that made me a nice target. But I also became very, very, very shy and introverted, to the point where I couldn't raise my hand, in class to say I have to go to the bathroom. It was that type of thing. So, it took a while. I actually didn't even confront him in a letter that I sent to my uncle until 3 years after I knew what had happened to me. Because especially by that time, I knew enough. And I could see that, by the Google Analytics, he was looking at my blog because I know where he lives. And I could see all of that. Yet he didn't respond to my email. So, and to my written letter that I actually mailed. So it's, it's an interesting thing to kind of come to grips with all of that. I'm not the only one. I know that.
That's what I was gonna
ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's at least 5 or 6 of us. And some of what I channeled about that and others have confirmed, it came from my grandparents who are on the other side and telling me, this is the cycle of abuse, which is why it was so important for me to write this book, because here I am, as sort of considered an expert, right, in channeling and working with cops. And then I have this discovery about myself, but yet I actually then after that fell right into an abusive relationship. And I had no clue about wounded attachment. I didn't know anything, I didn't know how to look at the signs, where that someone could possibly be a predator, because I ended up falling for a predator.
And that was after you recognized that you had been abused.
Yes.
So this was really interesting to me, because you were and still are in a happy marriage, right?
Yes.
I mean, you describe in the book how incredible and supportive and wonderful your husband was.
Yes.
Is. Yes. And then you discover this abuse.
Yes.
You stray.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think it just speaks to the power of repression, right? That when these memories were repressed and locked up, I'm not suggesting that they stay there. I'm just pointing this out.
Right.
That when they were repressed, because again, there is some discussion, particularly around trauma, whether or not sometimes repressed memories, if they are locked away and the person is functioning, what the value is in unlocking them.
Right.
And for you, in a lot of ways, it almost destroyed
absolutely
your life. So can you speak to that a little bit?
I sure can. So, yes, my husband is amazing and wonderful. And we've been back together. We split from 2014 to 2017. We've been back together since. But there were cracks, and as you go through the book further, you'll see.
When I finish it.
Yeah. You'll see that those types of things show themselves, the codependency. We both were codependent and didn't recognize it. Scott will say now that our split and everything that, obviously he didn't want me to go through the depths of abuse that I endured. And we didn't want to put our children through that, but I don't think we would be here today together without it. Because, it took me standing up to abuse as an adult that I couldn't stand up to as a child in order to heal that inner child. And then he took a big look at his codependent tendencies and his, how, as he says, like it's a gauge where you in a marriage, you sometimes put too much on someone, on your loved one. And so that's what was happening. So by the time, it was a perfect storm. And by the time I was at that point, the breaking point, I wasn't planning on leaving my marriage, or I wasn't planning on having an affair. Like none of that was in my view. I just happened to meet someone who pretty much now looking back was exactly the same as my uncle. And so, for me, it was interesting because I'm a very much a do it type person. Like I can take care of it. I'm DIY. I got this. So when I did find out about the abuse, and I went to a therapist, I went to a hypnotherapist, I went to a therapist, or, talking about it all. I was like, check. All right, I did that. I'm good now. Not understanding how much the subconscious drives our behavior. And now that all of this was coming up, I'm presented with, I've got cracks in my marriage. I had just lost a job. Literally, like the weekend that I meet this man, Tony, that you read about in the book, it was not something that I planned, but I was also groomed. And so as you read the book, you will see how easily that happens and how really anyone can be groomed. But if you have those deep wounds, no matter how tapped into intuition I was, I still went right down that same path.
Were you getting intuitive knowings about this is bad for me but yet you continued down that path?
In the beginning, no. In fact, in the beginning, like if spirit walks into the room right now, I will have full chills, typically on my left side, or all the way from my feet, all the way to my head. Right. And so that's a pay attention, spirit's here, or this, you have got to pay attention to this. When I met Tony, I had full chills from head to toe. There was a soul knowing about him. I knew it. What he did was very much in line with what an abusive predator would do, like Harvey Weinstein, right? The grooming tactics were very similar. There was the love bombing, right? You're amazing. I'll do whatever I can do to help you. You know, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I really feel like I'm in love with you, but I don't want to ruin our friendship. It was really fascinating to see how fast it happened. And that whole time I'm getting chills, and I'm even hearing from other people, well, it looks like you're supposed to meet him. And I know, I had a lot of friends and family saying, I know things have not been all that great with Scott for a long time. We were waiting to see when this was going to happen, when you and Scott were going to split up. So it was obvious for some people in my inner circle, that things were breaking down. They did not see that part coming, though. They did not see me diving headfirst into a relationship with a man, while I was still married. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I didn't see that in myself either. I'm not that person that would typically think, well, this is right. About 3 months in, though, I did start to have intuitive hits.
Were the chills that you were getting intuitively really about, whoa,
Right. Yeah. It's a weird. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
It's such a hard thing to decipher. But ultimately, like, there's two sides of me, right? So I have the psychology side where I know this is wounded attachment. I know I was groomed. I know all of that stuff. Was it wrong? Absolutely. Like, that's not who I am, and never has been who I am, that I would do that. I didn't want to hurt my family that way. Mm-hmm. However, spirit, of course, the kids are coming in, and they're telling me towards the end, once I finally got out of the relationship, they were telling me that this was planned before my birth. I couldn't have avoided him. So if you believe in, that some things in our life are planned, I don't know about everything. I still, again, don't know, I don't know everything I should know about this as if I were studying it for years, but I do know that piece. For me, I was meant to go through that. I was meant to tell this story, and I'm better for it. Scott's better for it. Our kids saw us fight for each other. They saw the fact that, intuition is really what saved me.
Mm-hmm. I can see that from a spiritual perspective. And
right.
Also I'm trying to imagine from the psychological perspective, because that's always what I'm trying to piece together here is, if you are sitting in my office and you're my patient and you're going into this relationship that from my perspective is clearly toxic and dangerous. And, what is sort of the role, or how do were there points from a soul's perspective where you could have still learned what you needed to learn, but maybe it not been as
probably, honestly, I don't know exactly. Yeah. I do believe, we obviously have free will. Mm-hmm. Could I have limited the time? Did I need to spend 3 years in this? The signs of abuse were showing after 4 months.
As they usually are with a narcissist.
Right. Exactly. So that piece, was very in sync with everything we know about narcissistic abuse and about sociopathic predators. But in the beginning, it wasn't like that. And so when I did, I'm very much about pulling in professionals. So I'm still seeing my therapist during that time period. She's sitting and listening. I'm sure she knew exactly what was going on, but I was not in the headspace to be able to do anything different. I just, there was, I was just like this, blinders on, here I go.
Mm-hmm.
I went to couples counseling even. Scott was like, please, let's go to counseling. Please, please, please. So I did. But the whole time it was almost like I felt like a robot in a way. I was like, nope, I'm done.
Right.
And I'm in love with this man over here. So I think it's tough. I do not envy you, as a mental health professional with somebody who has gone through, and I think there are quite a few of us out there who had, endured childhood abuse that then replicate this similar abuse as adults.
Yep. Yeah, it is extremely common because we try to unconsciously break that cycle.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but we pull in that same relationship, which is, so much of what I do and so much of why I value the work of long-term therapy in terms of trying to get to really what are the unconscious processes that are driving the behavior.
Absolutely.
But to just think, the spiritual and the psychological here really comes together.
It does. And it's hard for me to mesh the two. They seem separate to me in many ways, just in my coping and healing from all of it. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's a product of me feeling like I am kind of split in two a lot of times. I've got this spiritual side that happens. I think one of the reasons I'm a pretty good medium is because of the abuse I suffered as a child, because I can disassociate very quickly. I could be talking to you right now and things are coming in. Mm-hmm. And so there's a piece of me that has felt that for a very long time, but it was comforting to know, that there was a piece of this that I knew I needed to go through.
Well, that makes sense. And we know that children who have suffered abuse do disassociate, right? It's a coping strategy. It's a defense mechanism.
Right.
And so it's not surprising to me that you were able to, when you disassociated, connect with something greater, which also begs the question, what is mental health and mental illness? And when people are dissociating, and are they, dissociating, but are they able to connect in ways with other beings that may be helpful to them?
Absolutely.
And then we pathologize that. So I'm not proposing any right or wrong, any answers here. I'm just putting out some interesting questions that this is bringing.
But what was interesting too is that as I started, so those same kids, that I had started channeling, and some of the children stayed around me and they're still around me, they ended up helping me get out of that relationship. So for the first 4 months, I'm not hearing from them. But then around month 6, I'm hearing, this isn't what you think it is. But they couldn't say exactly what that meant, and I'm still in the woo, this is wonderful.
Right.
I'm feeling all the dopamine and, all of the different endorphins and things running through me. So gradually though, as the abuse got worse and worse and worse, and, a restraining order and all of that stuff, they were coming in and guiding me and saying, you have to go get a restraining order now. Do it now. Do it now. So they literally helped prevent me from being, destroyed by a predator. And that was huge. It was huge. I don't even know how you begin to think.
Well, and I think about what karma were they then working out, right? Like if they weren't able to, in this life, stop themselves from being destroyed from a predator.
Right.
How being able to work through that karma from the other side and help you not be destroyed from a predator is fascinating.
Right. Yeah. One of the particular kids, he was actually a little bit older when he passed. He was in his early 20s. So most of them are either children or they're in their young 20s, like, late teens.
Emerging adults.
Exactly. He was addicted to a lot of different drugs when he died, and he died of an overdose. And it was fascinating to hear him come in and say, he's your drug. And so he tried to get me to see that cycle of abuse that you get stuck in does become a drug. Like I had no idea the biochemical, dependency that occurs. And, I'm incredibly grateful because I don't know if I would have made it out. A lot of women don't make it out. I certainly didn't expect to, make it out and be back with Scott and have everything kind of turn out the way it has.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure.
Kiersten, can we do a speed round real quick?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You probably knew this was coming because you've been listening.
I do.
Spirituality means.
See, I knew it was coming, but I didn't prepare for it.
That's okay. I like it unprepared.
Spirituality means being human, honestly.
Yep. What is something most people don't know about you?
Gosh. When I was little, I wanted to be an ice skater. I used to skate on our ponds back in Ohio. That was what I hoped to do. I didn't think I was going to be, an intuitive investigator. Yeah, exactly.
What is one thing you are really looking forward to right now?
I'm really looking forward to spending more time this summer, with my family. We have a pool now and we're incredibly happy about that. So I'm so excited just to spend some time. I'm trying to make sure that I live in the moment as I get prepared for this book launch to happen in September, as much as I can. Mm-hmm. So I would say I'm excited about today and tomorrow, honestly.
What are you deeply grateful for right now?
The love of my family and my friends and, those little voices and their families. They've been incredibly supportive with me throughout everything. And it's just such a gift.
What book is on your nightstand?
Okay. So I just finished This Is How I Saved My Life by Amy Sherr. And I believe she was on your,
on my show. Did she write a new book?
She is writing a new book. Yeah, okay. She's got actually 2 new books that she's in the process of writing. But there's a story there too, but I'll have to share that another time. There was a connection there that happened with spirit and it was pretty cool. I just finished her book, which was incredible. And she's definitely a lifelong friend now.
I love that. Yes, she wrote How to Heal Yourself, I think.
Yep. Yeah, she's got the How to Heal Yourself from Depression and Anxiety. Those 2 different books as well. So yeah. Yeah.
What is your favorite spiritual or healing practice?
Oh, wow. I'm not going to say meditation because I'm too ADD for that. So it's not meditation.
That's the generic. That's
exactly.
A lot of people's answer. I'm not saying it's generic, but it's a lot of answers.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's a tough one for me. I didn't study any of this, so I'm not practiced at it. It just sort of happened.
Building.
Maybe it's furniture building. There you go. Honestly, maybe I haven't had to do that in a long time, which is good. I still have my fingers. But you're right. Maybe it's that.
What's the most transformative experience of your life?
Gosh. All of this, honestly, all of this. I am so grateful to be healed. I'm not completely healed. I don't know if I'll ever be completely healed, but I'm healed to this point where I don't have the triggers anymore. I was getting buzzing on my right hip every time I was being screamed at and yelled at. And that was little Kiersten. And as soon as I got out of that relationship, it completely went away. I don't feel that anymore. So, I'm even feeling things physically like that, which is pretty incredible to see that change.
Mm-hmm. And speaks to the mind-body connection.
Absolutely.
So if people want to buy your book, is it pre-order? Where can they find you? What if they want to buy your furniture? We didn't even talk about Shark Tank. Talk about that in the book, which is super fun.
I do. Yeah, I had to use my intuition on Shark Tank. That's for sure. There's a good story there. So you can find Little Voices. It's everywhere. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, KierstenHathcock.com. It's up for pre-order.
But it's not going to look like this.
Yes. Thank you.
It's manuscript.
I'll make sure that you get a copy.
I would love that. I would love that. Yes. So thank you so much for your time today. This was really, really interesting. It took us kind of all different directions. So I love that. It was not, I wasn't expecting it necessarily to go that way, but I'm glad that it did.
Good. Thank you so much. I loved it. Thank you.
Like what you heard today and want to hear more? Wondering what comes next and what it all means? Head over to Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere you get your podcasts and hit subscribe. Also, if you could take a minute to rate and review my podcast, I would really appreciate it. Stay tuned as we continue to explore life, death, and the space between.